Did she say what kind of animal it was that attacked her?
So yeah, they're saying it's some type of animal attack. Statistically, there's been more animal attacks, mysterious deaths, people gone missing.
In other news, local authorities remain perplexed by the animal attacks.
What attacked you in the woods?
An animal. What else could it have been?
Welcome back to It Was an Animal Attack, home of the supernatural drama series. I'm Fadzai.
And I'm Sandile.
And today we'll be discussing the mysterious Daniella Labonair, aka Alex Gilbert.
Talk about late favorites in the show.
Yes, well, not that late, apparently, as it's later revealed.
Yeah, as it turns out.
So, opening thoughts on Alex.
I mean, it's difficult to sort of get into a base level because of, the elephant in the room, which we'll obviously get to, but like a certain other character, very atypical in their protagonist sort of role. They have all the same sort of qualities of like supposed empathy and caring and determination to fight for her friends, but also it's like
supposed
like listen, I love her, I love my girl down, but also there's some storylines where it's like, what are we doing? Which, is that her fault? Considering everything that's happened to her, maybe not.
Yeah.
I can't say too much with it until we get into it.
Okay. Daniella Labonair, an interesting character when it comes to tracking her history. She's introduced in the 8th and final season of the Vampire Diaries. Congrats to those of you who made it that far. Stuff gets crazy. But we quickly learn that not everything is what it seems, and that she's actually a very long-running character in the universe whose presence, the effects of her presence are actually felt throughout the show and into the spin-off shows, even though the awareness of her presence has been, shall we say, affected.
Right, and I have to say that, like, before you actually sort of get into it, what a bold choice it was to, as far as retcons go, right? Because we here at It Was an Animal Attack are kind of, we're 50-50 on retcons, especially with this show. To make a retcon across, I think just the Vampire Diaries and the originals were happening at that time because Legacies fall squarely after the originals. But bold enough with one show to make a retcon that goes across two shows and like affects basically all the events that happened before up until that point. It's just like a crazy gamble. Does it work perfectly? I guess I'll answer your question with a question.
What retcon ever does?
What retcon works perfectly? And especially one being made in that last season of the Vampire Diaries, which we've said enough times. Wow, what was going on? But yeah.
I guess we'll get into her history?
All right, season 8. And again, characters you don't have to worry about. This witch character shows up in season 8. She's not the Sirens. She's not even the devil, who's like the main villain or whatever in the season. She's not Catherine
the
Pierce.
devil.
Right. She's sort of show up midwhile. And I think it's because, right, these last 2 seasons are while Elena Gilbert, who, for 6 seasons, main character of the show, was asleep with the Sleeping Beauty curse. This character is encountered, they're, decently powerful, and then they're defeated. And through whatever, we've gone back and forth about, witch's death doesn't directly mean that the spells that they did then collapse. Oh, what was it we were talking about with Bonnie in another episode in, season 5, where she dies and a spell on... It might be Silas?
Yeah, I think it's when she, petrified Silas and then her own death freed him.
Right, because she had been using expression, she had tied that spell to herself, and so her death meant that spell that was petrifying him was released. I guess similarly, this character must have tied the spell to herself because in her death, this, really powerful spell sort of gets set off and undone, and retroactively, you realize that it's not really clear if it's people's memories have been affected or if reality itself has been affected. And spoilers for another show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, for those of you who haven't seen it and do intend to. If you know what happened to Dawn in that show, where it gets retconned in that Buffy has this younger sister that's always existed, they believe, but we know from watching the show she hasn't been. We sort of get this retcon that there is a character who did exist in this world, who was very prominent and the core protagonist of the happenings in Mystic Falls, that was then erased from history. And then the show we've been watching up until this point has been kind of an edited version of events. It's a very crazy retcon, very like, again, bizarre but bold is what I would describe it as. And this character is apparently Alex Gilbert, the twin sister of Elena Gilbert. So
Doppelganger of the doppelganger.
we are spinning in the twinship of it all.
It's good that you made the Dawn comparison from Buffy, because in a similar way, the Dawn situation was like, is it just some sort of psychic editing? Has reality itself been warped? Because one of the big things with the presence of both these characters is that there are physical effects. Like, for example, Dawn has a bedroom in Buffy's house when she's edited into their lives, and she has like things that she owns. She has possessions and clothes and school supplies. We get like the inverse, let's say, with Alex, where physical things that must have existed alongside her in this world have now been affected by this cosmic retcon, as well as just memories. But it's still vague enough that you could be like, well, I mean, is it maybe things just moved? Has the timeline been altered? We're not sure. What we do learn about her is that she has been existing in Mystic Falls since the events of the first season, that she too is of the Petrova doppelganger line. And because of that, her importance to the story is as important, if not, sometimes more so, than Elena Gilbert's. Certainly when it comes to her relationship with the Michelsons and the original family and Klaus's hybrid curse and the creation of hybrids thereafter. But we later on learn that there are other things about her that link her to the spin-off show that do not involve Elena at all, which is how the retcon is able to cross over into both the shows that were running at that time.
So I guess just running through, of course, this is with the assumption, dear listener, that you know the events of, at the very least, the first 4 seasons of the Vampire Diaries. The sense we get of like season 1, starting off with Elena being this central protagonist and meeting these Salvatore vampires, and having this friend group. This is the thing too, is that like in season 8, we don't get like full, because there's certainly not enough time. That last season we get little flashes here and there, almost like how Sybil was in Damon's mind, like editing herself into his memories. We sort of get a flash showing the scene as we saw it in the season, and then overlaid on that like what quote actually happened. And I mean, the ease and sort of the manipulation of this is that, of course, they are twins, Elena and Alex, so played by, an early return for Nina Dobrev's mid-season of the last season showing up in these flashbacks. And we get a sense that, like, while maybe Elena wasn't necessarily the central character of the story, it was actually this Alex Gilbert figure who these Salvatore brothers were enamored with, who had like dated Matt and was being pursued by these old vampires that wanted her for a doppelganger blood. Although I guess that brings into question, right? It's like they are both Petrova doppelgangers, right? So are they interchangeable in the sense of, witches are always wanting these doppelgangers to fuel their spells with their blood because it's such a precious resource? Could they use either of them? And it's like, why were they always after Alex when like Elena, in the real story, not like in the show we've been watching. This is gonna get confusing, listeners, just kind of stay with us here. But like in the quote real story, sort of after the retcon, why were they always after Alex instead of Elena when Elena's also a viable doppelganger? Or am I remembering some of those flashes incorrectly?
I think it wasn't necessarily that they were interchangeable. I think it was possibly that Alex's heritage made her the better option, with regards to the lycanthropy of it all.
Oh,
because that's what it was really tied to.
I guess now that you said it, do we want to like set that up just to give an idea of like what's happening there?
We can, yeah. I mean, the Gilbert family tree is confusing enough as is for the first 7 seasons of the show, with Elena and Jeremy being these siblings who are then revealed to actually be adoptive siblings and then revealed to be biological first cousins. Because Elena is the biological child of John Gilbert, the person that she thought was her paternal uncle. And then Alaric's ex-wife, Isabel, is her biological mother. we learn that Isabel Fleming, their birth mother, was related to the Labonair family, who we have not touched on so far in this podcast. But quick summary, they are the biological family of Haley Marshall.
We know Haley Marshall, baby.
Tyler's werewolf friend. Very well-known werewolf family from New Orleans. And it is through Isabel's relation to both the Petrova bloodline that descends from Catherine Pierce and this Labonair werewolf bloodline that her children have both the potency of Petrova doppelganger blood, but also untriggered werewolf blood.
I guess that would... Because really the first time we get the sense that, like, Elena's importance as a doppelganger, or rather we get the sense that Elena is biologically important as a doppelganger, is when Klaus is hunting her down to use her blood for a spell, which is in fact like a werewolf-related curse, right? He's trying to break this curse that is suppressing his werewolf side. Stands to reason that this doppelganger child, already magically important blood, but also, as you say, sort of spliced in with this werewolf gene. Dormant as it may be, she is still biologically a werewolf. It makes sense that, like, mystically, magically, that would be more useful in that sort of sense. That is interesting.
And I think it is the first time we get to see how the genetics of identical twins might be affected by lycanthropy, because it seems that lycanthropy somehow did not pass on to Elena, but passed on to her twin. So I suppose when the embryo was splitting, as it does with identical twins, whatever magical force controls that gene went into one twin and not the other. Which is a wild narrative choice, but...
Yeah, that's an interesting one too, yeah, because it's like, if they're twins, then that has to be the case. But, like, this is the thing that confused me too about the flashbacks, is that they would reference Alex, right, in the context of Elena and them being twins, and them being Isabel's kids, and being adopted by the Gilberts, right, which is not too different from what we already knew, except for the inclusion of Alex. But usually when they would reference her in the context of the Labonair family, in the context of her werewolf side, they would mention this other sister, Ariel, who is also a werewolf, and I believe is also... I drew out a little family tree here so I could try and track it myself. And I'm looking at it here, and I have written that Ariel is sisters with Alex, and they are both cousins to Haley. In fact, Haley, who, listener, you already know from season 4. They are all in this Labonair family, this werewolf pack. But I don't believe... Like you say, Elena's a witch... Well, this is the thing too, is that we never get to the fact that Elena in the story is a witch. They never really do anything with it, because by the time they find out, she's already a vampire, and when she stops being a vampire, she very quickly goes into that sleeping curse.
Specifically Traveler Witch,
yes,
just to clarify. Yeah,
specifically
witch of the Traveler variety.
So Elena is of the Traveler bloodline, but not a werewolf. Alex is both a Traveler and a werewolf, and seemingly Ariel is just a werewolf. But I believe they all have the same parentage, except for maybe Ariel, who might be a half-sister. I can't remember exactly. I'll have to look that up later and maybe correct it next time. We'll see.
I mean, a fan theory that I saw might explain it in that since the actual Petrova doppelganger is supposed to just be like a physical copy of, you know, Amara, we get Tatia, we get Katerina Petrova before she's a vampire, that perhaps... because they are identical twins and this is something the spell was not prepared for, that werewolf gene that, you know, wants to pass on so badly could not pass on into a perfect copy of a Petrova who is supposed to be effectively human, and therefore it split and got one human Petrova doppelganger and then one werewolf gene having Petrova doppelganger who was then inadvertently more magically potent in relation to undoing Klaus's hybrid curse.
That is interesting, I guess. I mean, we're always talking about, like, answers we'll never get, you know, roads not taken.
The show is infamous for them.
Yeah, so,
threads that it refuses to finish pulling. We discussed recently in the werewolf episode about the whole silver thing and how does silver affect werewolves. We're never told. They're not going to tell us.
God, that silver one really threw me off, but that's I guess a story for another day. That truly stumped me. I guess also because again, broadly, events largely took place very similarly to how we already seen it, but it's like Alex was at the center of the story. Alex was the one in a relationship with Stefan, which I guess when she comes back in season 8, that is the most prominent connection that she has. And that's, of course, the conflict that comes in, because now that this like magical retcon in the world has been undone, in a very similar way to when Elena had her memories like compelled out by Rick of her relationship with Damon, Stefan now ends up in this situation where this relationship with this person who looks identical to somebody who he loved once, but he doesn't have any memories of this relationship with this Alex Gilbert until they do slowly start coming back because the spell has been undone. So that's like an interesting conflict, but more on that later. So she is the one who sort of dates Stefan, and it's like there's a vibe with Damon, and then through the course of season 2, she's the one being, hunted down by Klaus. What's interesting is that at the point when the sacrifice is going to happen with Klaus, where in the Elena timeline, Elena, as we discussed, Damon force feeds her his vampire blood to ensure that she survives the sacrifice and comes back a vampire. We learn that this did happen, but in fact with Alex, who, as we just discussed, was also a dormant werewolf at the time of like the end of season 2. It happens a little differently. It's all the usual stuff where it's like he sacrifices a vampire and a werewolf. He has the moonstone, and then he has the doppelganger. He gives Alex some of his blood. I can't remember the particular reason. I guess it was just how it was described to him to break the curse, right? Do we ever get into how Klaus knew how to break the curse, where he got like the information? Was it like Greta and Maddox advising him?
No, he's known how to break the curse for centuries because he was going to do it with Catherine first.
Right.
It's one of those things that's, again, just never told. Because it's like, why would any witches or witch spirits tell him this if they were seemingly on Esther's side and the hybrid is an abomination against nature? We don't know. Somehow Klaus figured out how to break this curse.
Right. But however it is that he knows, in this sort of Alex timeline, he, as part of the sacrifice, gives her some of his blood as the original hybrid. Again, very contracted timeline. Because she dies with the hybrid blood in her body, she then wakes up after surviving the sacrifice, having been a witch and a vampire and a werewolf. She wakes up a combination of all three.
Well, having been a witch and a werewolf who now has
Yes.
the vampiric hybrid blood in her system.
And it's interesting that like preceding in this timeline, it precedes even our learning of like, regular hybrids, because we have Klaus as the original hybrid, but he only makes more hybrids in season 3. And then she shows up at the end of season 2 as this triple hybrid, or tribrid, as they call it, which, listen, I don't love the name. It's a little bit cheesy to me, but that's just my opinion.
It's cheesy, but, on a show that names things travelers and hunters, so like, I appreciate them getting creative for once.
Did you ever this may not be appropriate, but like Halsey back in the day used to say she was tri-bi.
Now what does that mean?
So they would say that they're bisexual, biracial, and bipolar, and so they're tri-bi.
Oh, you know what? Happy for you, Halsey.
Love that for you. Listen, Halsey's iconic. Every now and then, a little slip up, which, what can you expect? But on the whole, icon. I remember 2020, it was like Halsey was right there in the middle of things. She was on the streets. She was with the people. Love to see it. Also, the music is great. Listen to Halsey if you haven't. I just literally every single album. This is not a Halsey podcast.
This episode was paid for by...
Yeah, I'm getting those Halsey ducats. I haven't shown you the financials. We're getting a huge payment from the Frangipan family. I hate that I know that. I know that Halsey's real name is Ashley Frangipan.
Frangipan. It's quite interesting to me that because of this retcon, we now see that it was hinted at, and possibly that was Klaus's intention in feeding her his blood in the first place, because he's suspicious and he's had time to ponder his own fan theories about this hybrid curse that he was trying to break. But because of the presence of the doppelganger blood in her own body already, she's able to come back lack a successful vampire werewolf mix along with the traveler witch magic. Whereas when Klaus then tries to make hybrids out of regular werewolves, it doesn't take because he needs the blood of a living doppelganger, which as we go into season 3 is where Elena then becomes important, because obviously now that Alex is a hybrid or tribrid, she's undead. So
Exactly.
her doppelganger blood is no longer useful.
And it really is, like you say, this is the first point. It is interesting that in this timeline, this Alex timeline, is that like Elena really largely is a side character to the story, which is so fascinating to watch happen as someone who's watched her be the main character for 6 seasons. It's like now she's like not even the Jeremy, right? Because Jeremy gets storylines. Elena really is just sort of like along for the ride. Even in the friend group with like Caroline and Bonnie, it's like Alex, Caroline, and Bonnie, and then like Alex's twin sister over there was also with us. It's really hilarious. But yeah, Elena finally in season 3 becomes important by virtue of her sister turning into this undead creature, and it's like, well, now we can't use her blood.
Season 3, I guess this is the Daleks.
I guess this is when she meets the Michaelsons.
Oh yes, the Michaelsons.
Yeah, we can talk about the Daleks of it all. And just so it's clear, in the scheme of the new timeline, I am also a Salix. Let's just like, it's like I was down for Stefan, I'm a Salix fan. So
I mean, I actually, because Alex is presented, she's...
You're gonna break my heart. What are you about to say?
I'm gonna say that because the Alex that we get to know through this retcon is not exactly like the Elena that we knew in the original timeline.
Yeah.
I do think she may have been better suited to Damon, and then Stefan would have been better suited to Elena.
That's fair.
I think that it was probably like her character in the show was probably inspired by the more book accurate portrayal of Elena, where she's kind of selfish and kind of stuck up and not the selfless, I want to martyr myself person that Elena Gilbert has always seemed to be.
Yeah.
Well, when the
Alex
writers
is...
feel like making her that way.
You know, listen, it ebbs and flows, it fluctuates like anything, but Alex, you're right, definitely does have more of a vibe of like, listen, I'll cut a bitch if I need to. And if push comes to shove, I'll throw someone under the bus. So they are very different in that aspect. And that may explain why she takes a more central like space as compared to Elena, because like she's more active more early on in the story. But that does segue nicely into like how she interacts with the Michaelsons, I think.
Yes, the Michaelsons. We get introduced as we know in season 3. The other Michaelsons show up. The most prominent one, apart from Elijah and Klaus, who we've already met in season 2, is Rebecca, who of course has her own history with Stefan, her own romantic history with Stefan Salvatore, and this brings her into conflict with Alex in the new timeline, as well as Elena, who does hold a torch for Stefan, but now we know doesn't have quite the same history with him as before. It's rather that Elena and Damon have been hovering in the background, each of them waiting for Alex and Stefan to become available so that they can sort of have them to themselves. And then Rebecca shows up and she's like now this new chemical thrown into the mix that is messing stuff up, because naturally she's been asleep for 100 years. The last time she saw Stefan, he was still very much in love with her, and now she wakes up and he's got this new love interest who is super important to not just him but also her brother and his plans. Seeing that rivalry take on a new sort of flavor with a meaner Petrova doppelganger was cool, because we saw shades of it when Rebecca met Catherine, but we didn't really get to see a lot of it because Catherine Pierce canonically didn't really know Rebecca very well.
It is very much like, and I think I've said it before, American Gothic, my favorite episode of season 4. It gives shades of Rebecca and Catherine, but it also gives shades of Rebecca and Elena without her humanity in the Elena timeline.
Yes.
When she's got that little stupid little red streak, which you love.
I love the red streak.
It very much gives that where it's like we're kind of bitchy to each other, but also there's a begrudging respect of like the vibe. It is very much like proto that. It's very early days. Like we're still in our oppositional phase, but like down the line, and it does happen down the line. It very much when you get to season 4 where it's like, okay, we're actually kind of better as allies than enemies. But also like you were saying in terms of Stefan and Alex, right? And then on either side being like Damon waiting for Alex to realize that, oh, they're together, they will whatever. And then on this side, Elena waiting for Stefan. How would Elena in this timeline play out, considering they're so far apart on the like chain of relations? Because it's like we don't get a lot of Damon and Elena in this timeline purely because, right, the reason Damon and Elena in the Elena timeline are a thing is through Stefan, right? He pursues Elena, obviously because she's a doppelganger of Catherine, but it's like the foundational relationship, the dynamic that forms between the three of them is because of Damon's desire to like mess up Stefan's life.
Yeah.
So it's like because of that, we see that playing out with Alex rather than Elena in this Alex timeline. And so Damon and Elena rarely interact. And so I thought that was interesting.
The interactions that they do have in this adjusted timeline bring to mind, for anyone who hasn't watched Glee or doesn't like Glee, I apologize.
Poignant reference for this podcast.
But it brings to mind like this early season 1 dynamic in Glee where Rachel and Puck briefly date, but they're both aware that they're just dating each other because they can't have the people they actually want who themselves are in a relationship with each other. Because like Puck wants Quinn, who's dating Finn, and Rachel wants Finn, who's dating Quinn.
Wow, that's such a 1-to-1. It actually gives me chills. It's so crazy.
I don't know what you call that dynamic. I've always wanted to give it a name because I'm like, it's not a rebound. It's like the people we want are with each other. So let's like fill the space by pretending we want to be together.
It's not a love square. It's like a love trapezium, I think is what it is. Where it's like the two at the top and then the two at the bottom at the far ends who now have this long thread between them, the very weak, wispy thread, rather than the close thread of the two at the top. It's a love trapezium. I've coined it now. Or trapezoid. I can't remember which is which. One falls under the other as a subcategory, I think. Or rather, one is an overarching umbrella for, like, you have a bunch of trapezoids. One of them is a trapezium. But I can't remember which is the shape I just described.
I know they use trapezium in the circus, so I think it's that one? No? Am I thinking of something else?
Isn't that the swings?
I don't know. I just assumed that it was.
I think trapeze artists are the guys who swing.
Oh no, that's trapeze artists. Yes. Yeah. You know what? Never mind.
Oh my god.
Trapezium. Geometry is a dangerous thing, people, and they do it in the circus for thrill.
We made the mistake of invoking maths, and I think that was our fault line. We will very quickly adjust and pivot. But yeah, that's a very, very interesting point on the Damon and Elena in the new timeline. That's so... The Glee thing has really thrown me. That's so fascinating.
What I like about Damon's darkness remains the same. Interestingly, other characters' darkness, which the show loves to talk about, the darkness, the allure of the dark side, is affected by this retcon that we learn that a lot of the things that were attributed to other characters in the Mystic Falls gang, a lot of the time, which we were like, that was out of character, which might be why the retcon was thought of in the writer's room in the first place, can actually now be attributed to Alex. And it's like with Elena's attraction to Damon, it's like, oh, as a character, the things that we learn about Alex, it makes more sense for her to have been the person guilty of these things. And also Caroline's attraction to Klaus is also something that we learn never happened.
You want to talk about a breath of relief for me when they started exploring that? It's just like, thank God, get my girl Caroline out of that nonsense. Okay?
It makes so much more sense. The season in which she and Tyler go through some of their greatest hurdles, it didn't make sense that she was also falling for Klaus at the same time. So I'm glad that retcon sort of explains away, because it's actually Alex who is drawn to Niklaus. Still a strange decision, because it's like, he murdered your aunt.
You know, it's not great, but then it's like, of course, with the more complex morality of Alex, it's like, at least we can play in this space, you know?
Yeah.
It's like,
she has the werewolf emotions heightened by vampirism that could never have been used as an excuse for Caroline, who was just a vampire and was her best, most coherent self as a vampire.
Yeah, that is, I guess, because that really facilitates well. And this is how, like you say, it's so well tied together, because it's like, as you proceed through that, because this is like season 4, mid-season 4 as we're talking. In the Elena timeline, this is around the time we get the like backdoor pilot to the originals, right? And it's like Haley, who, again, like a storyline where it's like this character who has served a purpose in the arc that they were in and like screwed over Tyler. And then after that, it's like, really, what are you doing here? And they sort of just like use her as a springboard to get into the originals and go to New Orleans, do whatever. It's like in the original timeline, it's Klaus and Haley who very randomly just like sleep together and,
yes.
and produce this child. And truly, it's like sleep together, like no glove. Like, what are we What's the situation? I guess when you're an undead immortal, you have no STDs and you can't reproduce. So I guess you can do what you want. Who am I to say otherwise? But wow.
I love that. When you're an undead immortal, you have no STDs and you can't reproduce.
I hate that the show made me have to think about that. You know what I'm saying? But regardless.
It was the first thing I thought of.
But yeah, so in this plotline that really felt like, I'll say it, a little bit contrived. I've said it before, but the actual backdoor pilot is one of the best backdoor pilots I've seen, actually launching into the originals. But it certainly is better facilitated when it's like we have this Alex Gilbert who already had this weird sort of back and forth with Klaus Michelson. It starts with in season 2 when he's using her to break the curse, but it's like she becomes a tribrid through that. I'm never gonna like saying the name. She becomes this triple hybrid through that, and she gains this power that like is her own, but in a very weird way is still somewhat tied to him, and it very much informs their interactions in the Michelson arc, and then also now when it finally becomes this weird like pseudo-sexual, somewhat romantic, when they do actually finally, you know, do the do, and she sort of effectively takes the place of Haley Marshall in that plotline, having this child, going off to New Orleans to start the original show, and being the main character there. And it's interesting that like that dynamic that shifts between like Alex and Klaus, because Elena and Klaus were always sort of, I don't know, it's gonna be interesting when we do the Elena episode sort of analyzing that. As I've said before, Elena and Elijah are really, Elena and Rebecca and Elena and Elijah are the original relationships that are the most interesting, even though the whole reason the originals are there is because Klaus has been hunting down Elena, so you'd think it would be him that's like most involved, but that's a whole other situation. Alex and Klaus are certainly a far more compelling oppositional forces at first, and then becoming this complex, like somewhat intimate relationship that leads into the next show, which, as we've said before, is a show that has a lot more complex shifting allegiances and like complex morality. It's like a Shakespeare play going on, and it's very interesting like stuff,
and more suited to a character like Alex, who
certainly
is very morally gray, which is why I was fine with her being with Damon. That the Damon of it all made more sense.
Yeah.
Certainly, if you had to choose between Damon and Klaus, I'd be like, could you really say who was the bad or bad boy?
At least Klaus has more gravitas, I guess. You know, Klaus is like an original. He's 1,000 years old. He's very stately. He's very, you know, the king of New Orleans. It's like you can work with that. Damon's just Damon. Like, I don't, I'm sorry. Like, you know, chemistry, vibes, whatever. We all saw Alex in season 3. Very exciting. But at the end of the day, it's like, even though it's more compelling than Delana was, it's happening concurrently with like the stirrings of Alex and Klaus. So it's like, it's this thing where people were more invested. I mean, I say people, Damon stans, were more invested in Delana than Stelana at a certain point. It becomes that thing now where like, I guess I don't know what Klaus and Alex's ship name is. It Clarix? Alaus? Nothing is good.
Clarix sounds like medication.
So many medical ship names in this show, frankly. We're prescribing you some Clarix for your indigestion.
Yeah, Baramy sounds like a cough syrup.
Benzo sounds like, well, I mean, benzodiazepine, right? That's like... But yeah, the scales sort of tip towards Clarix rather than Dalix in that sort of season. Which, I mean, it kind of throws the whole thing for a loop, because jumping ahead a bit, because when she comes back in season 8, it's like, it's always been Stefan, as it always is, frankly. So it is interesting that like the mentality of Alex Gilbert of like why she pushed Stefan so hard out in like that season 3 era. I guess it was just like too many plates to spin. You know, for the writers, it's like, we've got to explore all these relationships. Somebody's got to get pushed out.
Yeah.
Oh, but also, before we close out for season 4, we need to discuss... So, like, Jeremy in season 4, after the race for the cure, the Silas, Nova Scotia island plotline, where Jeremy's the hunter of the 5, and then he opens the tomb of Silas, and then Catherine kills him. As we know, in the Elena timeline, Elena, of course, this is the moment where she goes full denial mode because she can't deal with the death of Jeremy. And then when it finally dawns on her, she has a breakdown, and then Damon forces her to turn off her emotions. And that's how we launch into No Humanity Elena. In a similar fashion, but sort of in a more interesting way, it's like, obviously the No Humanity thing is like, we've explored it a couple of times with Alex already. She gets to that point long before Elena does. When Jeremy dies, as we know, she does have this vampire werewolf like hybrid stuff going on, but she also is a traveler. So she does embark on this journey of like using dark magic to try and bring Jeremy back to life. So that was an interesting revelation of like, she does this, I think in a similar way to, you remember at the beginning of season 4, that's what Bonnie was talking about doing when Elena had died and was in transition.
Yes.
And she was going to go into the other side and get her soul and pull it back or something. But in doing so, the spell backfires. And when she returns, she's not quite herself. She's this darker self, which is like, we've already been saying, Alex Gilbert, already like a morally grey character. She becomes this dark self in season 4, which, as you know, season 4 is the season in which she and Klaus take off. So take that as you will. Yeah, this dark Alex arc that we have to reckon with, where, again, similar to the Elena Humanity off stuff, but it's more compelling because it's like, she's not just being like, you know, oh, I just do what I want and I don't care about anything. It's like magical impetus, magical consequences. She's been corrupted by dark magic. And in a way, we were always talking about when we talk about dark magic is like, we want to see more of this. We want to follow to where this leads because the show would never actually do it. And so through this sort of Alex storyline, we actually get some sense of like, what happens when you do dark magic and the price is exacted? For a while, she is playing like regular Alex, but then it like, they see that she's up to like black magics. She starts using her friends as means to her ends. I think she tortures the Salvatore brothers at some point. Elena might have been there. I don't fully remember. Oh no, she was torturing Damon and Elena. And then Stefan comes up and uses some sort of, I guess him and Bonnie had like gotten together because this is also the era of Bonnie and her mother. No, Bonnie and her mother get those herbs for Rick in season 3, right?
Yes, that was the Eva Lorick arc.
Yeah, I guess that works. Like, Rick was being affected by dark magic.
Yeah.
Through Esther, like, preparing him to become Eva Lorick, so the herbs would suppress that darkness.
It's the Gilbert ring bringing one back to life, which I guess it's something the show, like, touches on but had never really gotten into until this point with the Alex of it all, which is necromancy being a very dangerous kind of magic that corrupts.
Uh-huh.
Because technically, the Gilbert rings are necromantic in that way. They're allowing someone to be on the other side for like a good hour or two, then pop back into their body fully healed. When Alaric first finds the Phoenix Stone, season 7, and explains to Bonnie how it works, she's like, this is necromancy, and she's immediately against it.
So, yeah, it is those same that they use to sort of knock her out and sort of like cleanse her of this darkness. I think they do, as they always, we bring out the like vampire ability to go into people's heads just when we need it for the story. So Stefan does go into her mind and sort of try and reach the old Alex. And he does find her, and there's this very like, I mean, unfortunately, very like Korra season 2 Avatar versus Dark Avatar, like force for good and force for evil direct fight in which Alex has to beat her darker self to regain control of the form. So that was, you know, it was something. It was something. It was an interesting arc to have this like dark magic stuff be explored.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, are we going to discuss the originals of it all? No.
I mean, what's the key stuff for when she comes back? I guess it's important that she has this baby with Klaus.
Baby Hope.
Baby Hope. She went home to feed Hope. She has a bunch of children. I guess suffice to say, she has children with this other character in the originals. I think when she comes back in this season now, and then just like joins the fray, she's got this gaggle of kids. So largely she's like at home with these kids and trying to reclaim her life. And like Stefan, who's in the middle of his Cade drama, that's the conflict there, where it's like she's trying to now regain this relationship with Stefan that she lost not just before season 4 when she left the show for like a couple of seasons. But by the end of season 2, it really is Damon and Klaus in season 3, and then just Klaus in season 4. So it is her trying to get back to her roots, I guess, get back to what was good in her life and what was kind and empathetic and sweet.
Which is messy when you consider, you know, the established Caroline of it all. But I, as I've said, was never a big Sterilide shipper.
Yeah. I guess I am curious that, like, given this new timeline, because of course they were never gonna reunite Stefan and Elena at this point, because at least up until we're well into Sterilide, Nina Dobrev wasn't coming back for the show. But I guess with the retcon, how do you feel about Stefan Alex versus Stefan Caroline? As someone who isn't invested in Stefan Caroline.
I guess regardless of how I would have felt either way about Stefan Alex, I always loved Caroline with Tyler, and the show does bring him back around that time, but then he dies.
Yeah,
so
I guess the one freaking consistency about these timelines is that Tyler's just always gonna die, right? Tyler's always gonna get written out or get killed. So what can you do?
I truly thought Tyler was being reintroduced to like take it back to the Caroline Tyler dynamic, which was always my favorite, and I assumed a lot of fans liked as well. But no, I was wrong.
So you were very much like, yeah, Stefan Alex, we need to pull this man away from Caroline.
Yes, if for no other reason than that I thought she would be free to pursue Tyler. But even without that, I guess I like Stefan with a Petrova doppelganger who's not Catherine.
Ideally not her. I guess they're sort of, because they move in with him, her and all her kids. I think the K-drama like threatens that this like home that they're building now with the, what's the surname? Because now she's got a bunch of barrels on her name.
So, well, there's the wedding episode.
Yes!
Which then leads to her getting Salvatore tacked on. So it's Alex, Salvatore. Is it Michelson? Gilbert? Why would her surname be at the end? Wait,
I think it's Gilbert Michelson. Yes, it's Gilbert Michelson.
Okay, so she had hyphenated Gilbert to Michelson.
Yes.
In the originals. So she was Alex Gilbert Michelson. And then after marrying Stefan, she becomes Alex Salvatore Gilbert Michelson. I guess she wanted the Gilbert Michelson at the end because that was the surname of the children she'd already had.
At least one of them, at least Hope. I believe the others are different characters' children. I believe.
Oh, those Jackson's kids.
I believe they're Jackson's kids, yes.
Wow, so they'd be Gilbert Kenner?
They would be Gilbert Kenner Salvatore, because I believe they take on Salvatore, those kids.
Gosh.
It's crazy.
Multi-hyphenate surnames.
You want to talk about traumatizing your children? Give them 4 surnames. Largely, everything sort of plays out as you'd expect, right? All the Cade stuff happens. Well, all the Siren stuff happens, and then she shows up, and then all the Cade stuff happens. And there is the return of Catherine at the end, which is like, I think at this point, Elena in between, because once she leaves, right, it's like Stefan and Damon, as we understood it to be in the Elena timeline, when Elena goes into the sleeping curse, Stefan and Damon sort of take up center status. But it's like in this retcon with the Alex timeline, it's like Stefan and Damon, and then Elena becomes the tertiary character now that her sister is off doing the originals. But I can't remember what's supposed to happen for her in that season 5 and season 6 that leads up to her being in the sleeping curse, because that's not really as important for Alex's retcon, so we don't really get much of that in the flashbacks. But like, what are you gonna do? I guess Elena in this timeline isn't the main character, so.
I guess the significant thing that happens towards the end of the season post, because, you know, obviously there's the infamous Cade just incinerating the sirens.
Yep. Full immolation.
Just decides he's gonna come and be the final boss for the season, but then he isn't. Various former villains start like eking out of hell, because once Cade is dispatched, the hell is sort of like a free-for-all, I guess. People are just like coming out because it's been taken over. And we see that the aspect of Alex's dark self that was created through the necromancy returns in the season finale as one of these denizens of hell who's come to wreak havoc.
Which is like, we have enough metaphysical questions about this show. It really is Dark Alex her own self, her own entity? Is she a separate soul? Like, what's going on there? What does that imply?
I mean, I guess you could headcanon it as the essence of necromancy itself. Right. Because, like, we know that the travelers dislike the use of spirit magic. So I guess the essence of necromancy itself could be coming from the spirits, and therefore either some residual energy from those spirits created like an entity within herself that was then able to go to hell when it was defeated.
Oh, you know what is a thing I like, and it plays into this like corruption aspect of dark magic. If dark magic corrupts your soul, maybe a piece of, not to invoke we're always invoking, not to invoke that story, that book series, but like, if this dark magic breaks a piece of your soul and that piece is representative of your darker self, and that's what went to hell, then that could easily be the thing that comes back to fight you in the last season.
That would make sense.
It's a part of her own soul that was excised once she abandoned the dark magic and fought herself in her own mind. Listen, it's tenuous, but I mean, it's better than nothing, because they very much don't explain the metaphysics of why Dark Alex comes back from hell.
That could make sense. I mean, we often have said that the criteria for going to hell in this universe is vague and unfair. But if Catherine Pierce's sins were enough to drag her straight there without her being allowed to go to the other side, like even Silas was, then yeah, I guess it would make sense that this dark necromantic aspect of Alex's soul, you know, was excised and fell away. The weight of its sins dragged it down into the seventh circle.
Because as we know, hell is a trap door. No, but hell is a trap door in the sky. People were getting sucked up into hell.
We love
Dark
it.
Alex very much predates the collapse of the other side. So.
Yeah, but Catherine was sucked straight up there as well. Like when she died, the other side was still very much intact, and she gets sucked into the night. So.
Remind me, because I was like, for a character who we're going to talk about for like an hour at most, I'm not going to go and rewatch the end of season 8. Does Dark Alex, because like you say, a number of villains come back and they turn out to all be working for Catherine. Was Dark Alex like one of this rogues gallery, or what was she doing?
I think she had her own vendetta, much like Kai, because it's like, it's not that Kai was working for Catherine, it's that he was like, I got a get out of jail free card for the day.
Yeah.
So let me go and mess stuff up. I think because Dark Alex had never really been her own human body, the effects of leaving hell weren't making her like start to dissipate, or like, what was happening? Like they were like all bleeding this black blood. Like Kai and Vicky and Kelly Donovan. So I think because she had more free reign as a person who was never fully human, because she was able to get out, she just wanted to exact her own revenge on the surviving Petrova siblings.
God, wild as hell. And freaking Nina Dobrev, man, as always, like playing 3 people at once. Why is Elena only shows up right at the end? Because she's been asleep.
Yeah.
But it's like, spinning those plates, girly. Let's give her flowers. Playing distinctive personalities. And in this one, it's like Catherine, who's also evil. And now Dark Alex, like literally the personification of Alex's worst, like, self. It's just killing it. Hate that she's a Zionist now, but like, you know.
Yep. She is?
She is, as it turns out.
Oh no, like actively?
I don't know if it's actively. I think it's like one of those cases where it's like, by default, because I'm an American celebrity, I believe that this is the right thing I'm supposed to be saying, which doesn't excuse anything.
And she's not even American, she's Canadian. Oh no.
Yeah.
Because I know half that cost, or at least I should say half the cost of both shows were like, I stand with Israel, when everyone was doing it.
Yeah, I think that was the last time I saw saw anything from her about it, but yeah, it was around that time.
Ugh. I had attributed that to the whole, no thoughts, head empty celebrity who lives in a bubble and doesn't know what's going on, but was just like, oh, to save face, let me say this thing that everyone's saying. But even that, in and of itself, is dangerous.
Is baseline like, no, screw you for doing that, because it's like, your ignorance does not make you excusable. Not to get into a dark place of it, but like, yeah.
Into the trapdoor in the sky with you.
With you, frankly. We're throwing you up there.
But it was nice seeing Dark Alex come back for the finale, and I think the reason they did that is because, as iconic as Catherine is, she was a baseline human and non-practicing traveler witch when she died, so she no longer had her cool vampire powers to be like as direct a threat once she came back, whereas the Dark Alex aspect was still the triple hybrid, as you want to call it, instead of the tribrid.
I'll put the extra syllables in. I will put in the effort. And it is, because when I think Hazel is her name. I was like, I'm not going to put in the effort to remember what that witch's name was. But like Hazel, sort of her death in this era of hell, right? Because that's how this comes up. It's like all these souls being plucked by Cade into hell. But her unretconning and this return of Alex was in its way like a foreshadowing for Dark Alex, who was on her way to come wreck shit in Mystic Falls. Because it's like, even though we see all this in retcon and in flashback, for Alex, this witch that she assumedly faced at some point between season 4 and when she comes back in season 8 was like her most prominent antagonist, is the one who like erased her from reality and like took away her personhood and literally just like copy pasted with her twin sister in her place and moved some stuff around, which is like, this is the woman who, at least for Alex, and it's like, what does that mean for Dark Alex, who was already dead on the other side by that point?
Dead?
Dead question mark. The connections are tenuous, but it's like this witch who took away her personhood and her identity, and then when Dark Alex comes back afterwards in that same season, it's like there's a little bit of foreshadowing there as like the scales balancing of that, but it's like that witch is long dead. She's burning in Cade's hell, so she doesn't get affected by this. Everyone in Mystic Falls has to bear the brunt now of like Dark Alex wreaking havoc. And once again, Alex having to fight with her darker self to try and save the day. Sort of concurrently, while Stefan's taking on Catherine, Alex is taking on Dark Alex. It's this really like interesting and poignant thing that happens that really solidifies that those two were they were the two. They were the OTP the whole time, and the show really like hammers home and reminds you that like this is who we started with and this was always the best option because they fit so well together. And I love that.
Yeah.
Stelena, in order of like the ships across the timeline, it is, it's tough between Stelena and Salix, but like Steroline is a very, very close second to Stelena. I think Salix might be between them now that I think about it. I might put Salix over Steroline, which hurts my heart, but here we are.
Stefan and Caroline were better as friends.
We can't go back and forth on it. I think they were great friends. I think it's perfectly fine for friendship to suddenly set on fire and become something different. It happens all the time. Daleks definitely before Delena, and there's a big gap between those two.
Yes. A chasm. A gap as wide as the trapdoor in the sky, which is now going to be a thing.
A gap as wide as the gap in the logic of Cade's hell.
Cade's hell. I can't get over Cade's hell. I'm just like, how did Silas get to go to the other side? Catherine got sent straight to hell.
Straight to hell. Silas was chilling. Silas, the original immortal who slaughtered plenty of people, killed Bonnie's dad just to do it. No, just means to an end, just to get rid of him.
He tricked.
I don't think Bonnie's dad was even stopping him, right? It was like, what's his name?
Rudy Hopkins.
What could Rudy Hopkins have done about Silas? He just killed him to like shock people. It wasn't purposeful.
I think he was testing his powers. He was like, can I murder this man in front of everyone and force them to be non-reactive?
That's so...
Like he manipulated a mourning widow widower, into being his puppet, Professor
You know.
Shade, who then manipulated Pastor Young into blowing himself and the entire town council up.
Crazy murder-suicide. Yeah, no, it's crazy that Silas does not go up there immediately. But story-wise, it predates the existence of hell, so what can we do?
That's all we can really say about Alex, since we're not touching on the originals right now, as you said. But an interesting wild card to throw into the final season. Keep things interesting. I was always wanting more supernatural creatures introduced, but this was definitely exciting.
Mm-hmm. I guess in Dark Alex, right, we get something sort of unseen before. That was nice.
Yeah, a different kind of shadow self.
I didn't even put that together. That's great.
Yeah, it's great because Alex's final fight is fighting against her actual literal magical shadow self, and arguably the thing that kicks off her story is being the doppelganger of Catherine Pierce, which brings Damon to town and starts everything off. So nice bookend.
Love that. I guess this is the point where we reveal, right? Because it's like...
If you're still with us.
If you're still with us and you haven't fully, clicked off in complete confusion and insanity.
If the gaslighting hasn't driven you away.
Oh, bless your heart. If you're listening to this on any day other than the day it releases, it will make no sense whatsoever. But, dear listeners, we did, in fact, release this on April Fool's Day. So, happy April Fools to anyone listening.
Ta-da! Ta-da! If you were watching this and thinking you were experiencing some kind of Mandela effect, or if indeed you were living through a retcon, don't worry. It's all going to be okay.
It's all good. It's all good. So I guess, Fadzai, if you could explain to our poor defenseless listeners what the hell that was.
You will be pleased to know that the character of Alex Gilbert, aka Daniella Labonair, does not exist in the Vampire Diaries or the originals. She is a fan fiction Mary Sue, who we discovered on a wiki that for some reason was linked to the Vampire Diaries wiki, which is already messy as it is, but this
so bad. It's so misleading. I love it so much. It's insane. It's ruined my life. It's my favorite thing ever.
And while, for those of you who are familiar with fan fictions, while Mary Sue might seem a little harsh, she is literally that. She is presented on this wiki. That is, this wiki presents itself as a genuine wiki. It makes no reference on her page to being part of a fanfic. But she's written in as Elena's twin, who is also betrothed doppelganger, but is also a werewolf because the Labonair werewolf line makes Haley Marshall so special. But she's also a witch because
she's a
of the
witch
Travelers.
long before they introduced the Travelers. It's like...
And I would have been interested in, taking the story somewhat seriously because, unlike a lot of people, I don't mind fan fictions. But
listen, it's a feat of skill to write something just baseline. Like, writing in itself, as writers, we know it is, writing's hard as hell. And we respect fan fiction and fan fiction writers. And I will say, these wikis are, the reason they can fool you so well is because they're pretty well put together. The information in them, fully insane. Makes no sense, not real to the Vampire Diaries. But if you were a stranger and saw this wiki, you would think this was real stuff. It's pretty well put together. There's multiple pages. It's so insane.
My only criticism is that her presence in the story, as it is actually written, the fan fiction, the effort to explain where Elena Gilbert now is not really made.
Yeah.
She's sort of just there.
At least in what we've seen online. Yeah, same with Haley Marshall, who she effectively replaces in the originals. If you've seen the originals, or if you know Haley from the Vampire Diaries, who goes to be a main character in the originals. Effectively, Alex Gilbert, quote unquote, takes that place, and Haley becomes this random cousin who's just there. So... yeah, a wild ride to have found this a couple weeks, a month ago. When was it? And just been like, You know what would be hilarious?
Let's make this an April Fool's Day special. But hey, you know, the whole dark Alex thing, that would have been interesting to see.
Truly.
You know, our actual witch character Bonnie, if she had an arc like that, that could have been cool.
I saw that in the wiki and I was like, yes, this is interesting stuff actually. And this is the thing about fanfiction where it's like, and I've said this before in the podcast, I used to not like fanfiction like at all, and I have warmed to the idea recently, especially with the show, where it's like you can fill in the gaps where interesting stuff could have been done. And this is a very good example of it, of like dark magic, dark self, actually following through on something you said you were doing in the show and then stopped halfway. No, let's follow the line to where this could go, you know? Everything around that, by the way, we fully made up. Like, truly, the line was... the line was, she does dark magic, and then she has a dark self, and we just ran with it. The witch Hazel, by the way, now that I say it together, you see where that came from. I was thinking about witch Hazel. So...
I didn't even catch that.
But she's real in my heart.
We improv'd our way through that.
But yeah, if you're still with us, thanks for coming along on our ridiculous, chaotic train ride. We just wanted to have a little fun in between some very tense times and some very tough episodes to prepare for. So don't worry, soon along in the feed, you'll get your usually scheduled programming. We'll be doing canon real characters going forward.
Admit it, she was more interesting than Cade.
Listen.
And Julian and Dr.
Julian.
Wes Maxfield.
Dark Alex outsells at least 4 of the Vampire Diaries villains. Don't even act like she doesn't. Okay? Marcos, he doesn't hold a candle to my bitch, Dark Alex. All right. Oh man. I'll see if I can cut together the interstitials of us fully losing our minds as we try to do this.
So, opening thoughts on Alex.
I mean, it's of course.
Are you
good,
corpsing?
I corpsed immediately. No, I'm fine.
Daniella Labonair, introduced in, wait, are we saying season 8?
Yeah. Let's say technically
Yes, okay.
season 8. And spoilers for another show, because I think it's very similar. Plane going past. Jesus Christ. I'm trying to improv Cape Town International, and I think I'm doing pretty well.
You're doing amazingly.
I guess now that you said it, do we want to like set that up just to give an idea of like what's happening there?
We can, yeah.
Okay. I mean, go for it.
So, sorry, I'm just reading here.
That's all right. Take your time.
Yes, anding my way through this.
Yeah.
Ariana would be proud. Season 3. I can feel myself going insane, but it's fine.
That's fine. Just roll through it. Just push through it. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know.
There's something so wrong.
What were you gonna say? What were you gonna say?
You were like, at least Klaus has more, and I was gonna say indigenous ancestry.
No. Not where I was going at all. Oh. Is it not Elijah? Have I been saying Elijah this whole time? I meant Klaus.
Alex and Klaus.
Have I been saying Elijah this whole time?
You've said Elijah a few times.
That's crazy. Which is the season that she and Elijah take off, so it's like, you know, read that as
Klaus.
you will. So I keep saying Elijah!
She and Klaus.
Oh, God. I just have Elijah top of mind. Damon, and then Elijah, and then mostly Elijah in season 4, you know? So it's her trying to sort of get back to
Damon and Klaus.
I keep saying Elijah! Oh my God! This is insane! I don't know if you want to add anything else besides before I close up.
I think we've done enough.
We've done enough psychic damage. Thank you all for listening to us, despite your better judgment. If you'd like to get in touch, question, queries, just saying hi, you can mail us at animalattackpod@gmail.com. You can also tweet us on Twitter at animattackpod. That's at ANIM attack Pod. You'll find a link tree in the bio that will take you to all our online stuff. If you're listening to us on a podcast platform, give us a rating, give us a review. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you're having fun. Let us know if you absolutely hated this. And you know what? We can't hold that against you. But otherwise, have a good one. Stay safe and see you next time. Cheers.
Happy April Fool's Day. Have a good April.
Bye.
Bye.